Let's bring in MS Now White House reporter Laura Barron Lopez, MS Now analyst Ayman Mohyeldin, and professor of law at Hofstra University, James Sample. It's good to have all of you guys with me this morning. Laura, I'll start with you there in D.C. President Trump is set to take part in this dignified transfer at any moment. Do you get any sense from your sources there around the White House that he is feeling the pressure of the human cost of war?
No, not necessarily, Antonia. And I think that even more than what White House aides may say behind closed doors, what we should be paying attention to is what the president says in public. And he was asked about the deaths of these fallen soldiers just this morning. He was asked about the fact that Americans are against this war and what would he be saying to the families. And he simply said Americans are not against the war, that this was something that he and said that polls showed, he falsely said that polls showed that Americans support the war. They're just not happy with gas prices being down. The president has also in the past downplayed deaths or simply said that that is ultimately the way it is. He has said that that is the cost of war. And so there's no indication right now from the president himself that these deaths are going to change his decisions when it comes to how long he's going to stay in this war or what exactly he is going to try to achieve in this war, Antonia.
Yeah, and to be clear, we do not actually know what poll the president is referencing there when he claims that the American public actually does support this war, and that their concerns are just isolated to gas prices. That also doesn't reflect what our colleagues who've been out on the road week after week talking to Americans are hearing. Consistently, the war comes up as a point of major disappointment, outrage, and concern. Ayman, the president has posted a lot, as he always does, but one post has caught a lot of people's attention, where he kind of goes through the numbers of dead service members. Afghanistan war, 20 years, 2,000 dead. Iraq war, 9 years, 4,600 dead, so on. He ends it with Iran military conflict, 4 months, 18 dead. What do you make of that, this sort of idea that you can measure these things up by the numbers? The goal, it seems to be, implicit in that, is to say, well, only 18 people are dead, and that means that this is okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is callous, it is cold, it is disrespectful to the families of the fallen service members who gave their lives for, as the president said in that tweet or post, conflict. He didn't use the word war, and that shouldn't be lost on anyone for probably legal reasons. This is a full-blown war, and nothing undermines the president's own message where he stands and says these are children of families and we are going to give them our hearts, than to post on social media that it's only 18 lives that have been lost. So in some ways trying to tout that it's not as bad as previous wars, completely negating the fact that this war has no authorization, no clear objective, has failed by most metrics, has made lives for Americans that much more difficult, has basically upended the global economy, and on top of that, cost the lives of 18 service members. I would like Donald Trump to tell the families of those kids that will be buried today to look them in the face and say, hey, it's only 18 members that have been killed. It could have been a lot worse. So far, so good. That is such a cold and reckless way of measuring whether this conflict, this war, whatever you want to call it, this quagmire, is achieving its objectives or not.
Yeah, I mean, one of the service members, Isabella Gonzalez, is 19 years old. I mean, this is heartbreaking in every single one, all four of these circumstances. But a 19-year-old, it's just sort of shocking.
Graduated from high school a year ago.
Right. Graduated from high school a year ago. James, Ayman touched on this, but the fact that this is a war, there is no authorization here. Last week, I had a conversation with Michael Weiss, who you both know as well, who was saying that all indications at this point are that this could drag on for years and years and years because the fact that the diplomatic off-ramps basically don't exist anymore, and this administration seems comfortable with this sort of escalation pattern and tit-for-tat pattern here. Is this not a constitutional crisis to have a war that could drag on in this way, but the American people and their elected representatives have no say in it?
That's absolutely right. And the answer to your question is yes. It's not the first time that we've encountered that particular constitutional crisis. Paul Rieckhoff yesterday on air on MS Now said, and I thought it was very well put, he used the analogy of this is the problem of putting the cart before the horse. This is the problem of being in this situation without having gone to Congress first. Now you're asking Congress for money to fund a continued war and putting the representatives of the people in the position of either, in their view, having to strand the troops, as it were, feeling, because if you don't fund it now, you look like you're hanging them out to dry. That's why the framers of the Constitution, who did give the president the commander-in-chief power, that is a power that they lodged with the president, but they very specifically bifurcated the powers of war and gave that power to Congress. So we have these war powers resolutions, but unfortunately, there's sort of the law and there's the realpolitik of it. And on the law, this is unlawful. On the realpolitik of it, it's not stopping.
So on the law, because you're the attorney at the table, do you view what the president posted recently, saying anytime the Islamic Republic of Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran? Is that an open threat of a war crime?
Absolutely. So there are rules with respect to the rules of engagement and the rules of war that make it very clear that when you target civilians or civilian infrastructure, that it needs to be very, very limited, very circumscribed and proportional. What the United States is doing by saying that if you attack our military, we're going to attack your civilians and your civilian infrastructure is the definition of the violation of those principles.
And even the Iranians do not seem to care about these threats at this point.
No, at this point, they feel that the war has become a quagmire for the United States. They understand the political reality that Donald Trump is operating in. They understand very well the economic situation that Americans find themselves in because of this war. And there's no doubt that Iran has suffered a lot. I mean, they have lost lives. They have lost the school children that we've talked a lot about. They have paid a very heavy price for this war. But their calculation is if they stop now, if they allow the United States to be able to run amok with this war, Iran will be subject to yet more bombings in the years to come, the way it was a year ago with Operation Midnight Hammer, only to be followed by this particular war. So they've made the calculation that they can withstand the most of the American military up until this point and feel they have nothing left to lose, and so are fighting, not only because they are fighting for whatever they believe in, but because they believe this is an existential crisis for themselves. And when their back is up against the wall, they have been messaging that to their own people, that this is a conspiracy to collapse the Iranian state. And that is driving, in part, why they are responding the way that they have been responding.
And on the U.S. side, of course, so much of what is driving this is their concern about nuclear weapons. We've heard that from the president, Hegseth on the Hill yesterday. And then we have this Wall Street Journal reporting that Trump has approved a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia that would provide the country with a civilian nuclear program and potentially nuclear enrichment down the line. Can you help me make sense of this, Eamon? Because what we were told, right, when this whole war with Iran began, was that an autocratic, religious despots, all of this Islamophobic rhetoric around Iranians and others in the region, people like this cannot have nuclear weapons. The survival of the United States and our allies depends on them not having nuclear weapons. But it seems that a move like this, Saudi Arabia is not some shining democracy on a hill, first of all, run by Mr. Bonesaw and someone who murdered a journalist who many of us know. And so there's that piece here. But there's also just the fact that this seems to open a door to a kind of arms race, nuclear arms race in the region that will be hard to contain.
Well, this was never about nuclear proliferation, right? The United States and Israel always made this about we want to have a nuclear-free region. And that was never what this was really about. Israel has nuclear weapons, worst kept secret in the world. Now you have this deal with Saudi Arabia potentially allowing them to enrich nuclear programs. There was talk at one point that Egypt wanted to try to pursue that. There was talk that the UAE also wanted to pursue that. So the issue was whether or not the United States was consistent and whether or not there was a clear standard by which the United States was approaching the region and whether or not countries in the region were allowed to have nuclear enrichment. What has emerged is that if you're an ally of the United States, if you are Israel, if you are Saudi Arabia, you can get away with it. You can have nuclear weapons if you are Israel. If you are Saudi Arabia and you want to pursue a nuclear program, if you're an ally of the United States, they can overlook all the other concerns that you highlighted, which is, concerns about nuclear proliferation, human rights records, what have you. But if you are Iran, a country that is not allied with the United States and fundamentally opposes what the United States and Israel has done in the region, there is a different standard for you. And that's why we are seeing this. That's why so much of the rhetoric that the United States espouses about human rights, democracy, non-nuclear proliferation in the region just falls on deaf ears in the region. People don't pay attention to it. People don't necessarily care about it because of that double standard.
Is any of it coherent to you, James?
No, it's not. I mean, I guess what is coherent about it is coherent in the sense that there is a coherent theory, which is that the king can do no wrong and that the United States is the global king, right? That is a coherent theory. It is one that is problematic and has all sorts of issues with it, but you can at least rationalize it and make it coherent, to use that word. That being said, there are a lot of problems with it, and in the long run, it comes with a lot of costs, not just for the globe, but potentially, look, empires rise, empires fall. And what Ayman's talking about here is reputational costs. Reputational costs are real, particularly vis-a-vis neutrals and allies.